So the first thing that I wanted to talk about today is really why I'm doing this. And the reason I'm doing this is because I notice that for me and for lots of people, mindfulness is really inaccessible. Mindfulness is something that doesn't always feel possible for a lot of people for a wide variety of reasons. And that might be because our brains work in slightly different ways. It might be because we've had difficult experiences and sitting still in silence, often with our eyes closed, and doing body scans can really be quite difficult and painful and tough for a lot of people. So I started kind of researching and training beyond my work as a mindfulness teacher and as a psychotherapist, and looking at the kind of neurobiology of stress and distress, and thinking this really can be applied more to mindfulness, that I think should be a little bit more accessible, that there aren't only one or two ways to practice mindfulness, that there's actually a whole variety of ways that we can come into presence. So I suppose I wanted to speak first a little bit just about what we're doing before we kind of do stuff. The main principle here is that we're going to be doing quite a lot of sort of activities. And the thing that I will say right off, and I will repeat throughout, is you don't need to do anything that you don't feel comfortable doing. So everything's a suggestion, everything's just an idea, and the ideas are there to sort of help you feel less of that intensity that we sometimes feel when we practice mindfulness. So don't do anything that doesn't feel comfortable. If it feels really, really distressing or uncomfortable, don't do it. Stop, open your eyes, look out the window. I would always sort of suggest having a bit of a shake, or another really great position to kind of get into if we've started feeling quite stressed or distressed in our body is to kind of stand and bend the legs, and you can bounce or you can stay still with the legs bent, but it kind of brings a bit of strength back into the thighs and the hips, which can often sort of help a little bit if we've got a bit churned up or triggered or distressed because maybe the noticing got a bit too much. So right from the off, if anything we do feels a little bit too much, move around, lay down, look out of the window, try a little bit of a shake or a bend through the legs to get the leg muscles kind of strengthened, and don't do anything that doesn't feel right for you. So the first thing that I wanted to sort of talk about is why mindfulness might be difficult for some of us sometimes, and sort of not necessarily looking at the individual reasons sort of around kind of difficult experiences or mental health issues or neurodivergence, but more about what might be happening in the brain and the body that we can counteract. So the first thing I'd sort of say is if you raise your hand up and kind of look at it, so sort of palm on. And I'm going to use this hand as a way to sort of understand the brain in a very simplistic way. So I'm going to say the palm here, this is the back brain. This is the part of the brain that deals with what we often talk about as fight and flight, and also freeze. So these are sort of threat responses that we're often doing without really realizing we're doing it, because we feel a bit stressed, distressed, or sensorially overwhelmed in some way. We're often kind of using this part of the brain. And so this middle part of the brain here, we're going to fold the thumb over the hand, and the middle part is the part of the brain that kind of deals with sensations and memory and feelings. And that's kind of, it's there in the middle there. And if you fold your fingers over the top like this, what you've got here is the frontal lobes, the parts of the brain that does cognition and thinking and planning and noticing and time and all these sort of things that really need to be present for us to be doing mindfulness. So if we kind of consider that mindfulness in its essence is being in this present moment, noticing this present moment with compassion and without judgment. So, I've had it described to me as like an aeroplane, to fly, to be in mindfulness, we kind of need these three components: that we're present, noticing the here and now, and that there's a sort of sense of something kind and compassionate about that. And that really links into the not judging. So our brains and us as human beings, we tend to judge constantly. that's boring, that's bad, that's annoying, that's difficult, that's painful. And so it's sort of drawing away from that and just noticing that's what's happening. And in that moment of noticing with kindness and compassion and without judgment, here in that moment is where we're practicing mindfulness. And I think it makes absolute sense to me that if we're feeling overwhelmed, if we're feeling distressed or stressed, it really isn't possible for us to kind of come into that conscious, kind moment of presence. So this workshop and the following workshops are kind of all about finding different ways to kind of keep the brain and the body online. So if you think about what's happening when we're stressed or distressed or sensorially overwhelmed, is that we're starting to go offline. That frontal part of the brain goes offline, and we're left with this quite simplistic part of the brain running things, sending all these messages down to the body going, heart rate up or heart rate really slow. So we get really agitated and angry or anxious and fearful or really kind of floppy and disconnected. And those are different sorts of states, but they're ways that we might fall into that as soon as we start to kind of go into this place of noticing. That's often actually quite triggering and quite overwhelming for a lot of people. I've certainly experienced that myself, where I've experienced this sitting still with my eyes closed, noticing my body and my breath as actually intensely distressing and loud and noisy in a way that doesn't feel comfortable for me. So we're going to sort of work with the idea that the nervous system needs to be brought back online. We need to be at least sort of, mainly online, like think of Wi-Fi bars. We need to be not offline to be able to be in presence. It makes sense. We need to be able to notice what's happening in a comfortable and compassionate way. So kind of with that in mind, we're going to try out some new things. We're just going to try out a few new things. There's sort of the way that I'm going to do things is that we'll do each thing for a few minutes. And like I say, if something doesn't feel comfortable, don't do it. Just stop. Do what feels right for you. If you need to step away for a moment, whatever's necessary. And the sort of last part of the session, I've actually sort of set aside for questions and things like that, and that may or may not be interesting or necessary. And like I say, lots of people haven't come today, so this will go out to people as a recording, and any kind of questions or chat at the end would not have gone out as a recording. So if you do want to use that time at the end, you're more than welcome. If you don't, we'll probably finish around 1 o'clock. So, or say 5 past. So the first thing that I'd like to kind of look at doing. So today's workshop is all about the eyes. There are lots of different ways that we can sort of bring the brain back online and send these different messages to the body that all is okay and it's okay to be present in this current moment. And I think the first thing that I find fascinating about the eyes is the eyes are an extension of the brain. And I think we always think of them as separate, but the eyes are actually a part of our brain that's exposed. And so what we do with our eyes has a huge influence on what the brain's doing. They're not just seeing and taking in visual information. The way they move and what's happening with them sends an enormous amount of information back to the brain that will tell us that we're either okay or not okay. So interestingly, staring at a screen sort of really intensely like this has a tendency to start to send that frontal lobe sort of offline. So, looking away from screens, looking up away from screens is an incredibly important thing to do and to remember if we work on screens quite a lot. So just kind of thinking, well, the eyes is where we're going to focus, but we're really looking to kind of find little windows and pockets of mindfulness, of respite from any kind of stress or distress if we can. So the first thing I'd like to show you about the way the eyes can be used is the idea of peripheral vision. So this is the opposite of this staring eyes. Staring eyes, this kind of really, leaning in, looking at quite a small window of space. This is what the brain tells the eyes to do when we're looking for threat. So staring eyes tend to send a message back to the brain that it should be looking for threat. And so it becomes a loop. Staring eyes, looking for threat. The brain says, oh, staring eyes, keep looking for threat. There must be a threat somewhere. So we stay in this kind of loop of feeling a bit stressed and distressed. So one of the ways to kind of come out of that is to change the view. Yeah. So if you take your hands to the side of your head for a moment, and what you're going to do, so if you can kind of, I mean, you can watch me do it for a moment, but then kind of you're going to look away from the screen quite a lot in this workshop. So the idea is that if we kind of let our eyes kind of go a bit blurry, we're trying to see our fingers. So we might need to start quite close, and we might start to kind of wiggle your fingers and draw them out as far as you can. And it might be right out in a T shape, it might be here, but sort of playing around. Where can you still see your fingers? So you might want to look sort of up and ahead, slightly above. For me, it's slightly above my screen that I have in front of me. And I'm just going to try and get this idea of peripheral vision. So this is the staring focused vision. This is peripheral vision. And we're going to do a few different things that kind of play with this idea throughout the workshop of focus and peripheral vision. Lots of other things that we can do with our eyes. But just for a moment, kind of sinking into peripheral vision. If you notice you're kind of going back into staring, that's where the fingers are really, really useful. And you can, if you feel like you've kind of got it, oh yeah, I've got peripheral vision on now, you can let the hands down and just see if you can keep that. Like, it's kind of a whole view. And often when we're a bit stressed and we might not even know our brains and our bodies are a bit stressed, our eyes really quickly want to go back into focusing on one point. So we really quickly go and focus on something. And that's where it's kind of bringing the hands back up and just seeing if we can keep that peripheral vision. I think what's quite nice is that you'll often start to sort of feel, you might see my eyes doing that if you have a quick glance, that the lids kind of come down a little bit because we're not in staring eyes. We're not in that kind of looking for detail, focused eyes. We're kind of trying to just come into peripheral vision. And this is one way to come out of that slightly intense state that we're all often in these days, of focus and looking for the next detail, looking for the next thread. So just kind of keeping that peripheral vision on. Each time you notice yourself going out of peripheral vision, coming back into peripheral vision. So just letting your eyes rest in a way for a moment is one way that we can kind of change this feedback loop and start to see if we can just, in a sense, all we're noticing at the moment, all we're getting our attention focused on, focus, is the whole field of vision. And if we bring in a little bit of those mindfulness concepts, we might be judging what we're doing, we might be wondering why, we might be struggling to stay in peripheral vision and coming out of it. And that's fine, that's really normal. The eyes, like all parts of the body, the brain and every other part of and every system, it does what it knows. So whatever's familiar to your body, to your mind, to your brain, that's what it will do most. So if being in very focused vision is what's familiar to your eyes and your brain, this will be a little bit tricky. So that's really okay. And that's the kind of self-compassion, non-judgment bit. It's kind of going, this feels a bit silly, or this feels a bit boring, or I'm struggling to keep hold of my fingers in my vision, and that's okay. That's normal. That's human to feel things are silly or boring or hard. Just keep coming back to that. I'm just letting my eyes have a moment of respite, a break. Not necessarily closed break, because actually closed eyes is quite different for the brain, and often for some of us that can feel quite scary or distressing or overwhelming. So this is just another way to kind of bring the mind down, kind of turning down the volume on what's getting in. Interesting, we're taking in more vision in a way, but less detail. So just letting that peripheral vision, seeing if it can start to feel like an idea that you could really learn. Peripheral vision. And just kind of coming out of that for a moment, we're going to move into the next, I don't like the word activity, the next bit of something to do. And I'm going to stand to show you this one. But like I said, I'm going to keep working with this idea of sort of drawing the eyes in and out, learning a new way to use the eyes to kind of down regulate, to turn down our fired up nervous systems, the stressed and distressed nervous systems that we might have for a multitude of reasons. As I said, it could just be because we're living in a very stressful world. So jumping straight from stressed state to trying to do mindfulness is often, I think, too big of an ask for actually most people. It's a huge leap for the body, for the brain, for the nervous system. I think very, very practiced meditators might be able to make that leap. Maybe their nervous system is really sort of strong and can bounce back really quickly. But for me, especially around kind of trauma and neurodivergence in particular, I think it's sort of imagining that people can jump from stressed and distressed, sensorially overwhelmed to, hey, I'm really present and I can notice and be compassionate, is a huge leap. Physiologically, it's a huge leap. So if you've struggled with that, that's really okay and really, really normal. So if you can stand or you want to stand, go ahead. When I stand, I have a tendency to kind of get my feet nice and wide and my knees a little bit bent because it feels comfortable. And what we're going to do here is we're gonna follow our hands with our eyes. So we are focusing now, but we're just going to see what happens with this. We're going to take our hands like kind of palm down like this, down to around kind of belly button height, sort of maybe, I don't know, so far out in front of you, so not too close, but sort of comfortable so that your shoulders are relaxed. So we're not reaching out, we're not tight in, we're comfortable. And what we're going to do, and I'm going to say, like, imagine sometimes, and I know that many people can't picture or imagine things in their mind, and that's really fine. If you can't, don't, just do the movements. Some people love imagining, that feels really interesting and lovely and helpful. So if it's interesting and lovely and helpful, I would ask you to imagine that you're placing your hands on the surface of water, as if you were standing, say, in a lake. And you're going to start to kind of move your hands from left to right on the surface of that water. And one thing I will say about what's happening with the hands right now is they're not kind of really rigid, nor are they completely floppy. They're kind of somewhere in between the two. You can kind of play around with really rigid and really floppy to find what that might feel like for you. And we're just kind of gazing at, say, the tips of the fingers with our eyes. And we're just sweeping our hands in this kind of motion. If we're imagining water, fantastic. If we're not, also okay. We're just letting our hands guide our eyes. We might start to make kind of little swishing movements, almost like a really drawn out figure 8. Kind of imagine the kind of loops and coils you could draw in the surface of the water. Just having a go at drawing that out with the hands. You might start to slow down as well. Just gazing out, either at the fingertips or just beyond the fingers. You might notice if you stare just beyond the tips of your fingers that everything gets a little bit blurry. That the eyelids again start to lower. You might go even more slowly. And I sometimes notice, this isn't always the case, but I sometimes notice that when I slow my hands down and my eyes get kind of blurry, my breathing can get a little bit deeper. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes it does. And that when the muscles around the eyes start to relax a little bit, this sort of blurry vision, actually also the rest of the face starts to relax a little bit as well. And you can kind of carry on making that motion just for a moment or two, letting the eyes follow just beyond the tips of the fingers. And then whenever you feel like that's done, it's always a funny one. I hear that often in my yoga classes and things, when that's done, and yet they just carry on anyway. So if it wasn't done, I'm never quite sure, what we're meant to do. But I guess if we're listening to this afterwards or later, we can click pause. So the next thing that we're going to do, and still kind of with this idea that we are, without force, bringing ourselves into the present moment. We're not doing it in a way that maybe feels, for me, often quite forceful. Notice the breath and do this body scan and sort of sit still and upright with my eyes closed, and it all feels quite sort of intense often and quite forced. Force your focus to be unfocused. We are seeing if we can use what we know, what is out there as information about the way the brain works, to kind of do things with our body, with our eyes today, and more about the eyes, that will kind of help our mind and our body come into this place of presence. And the non-judgment and the compassionate bit, that really is the practicing bit. That's the bit that takes time, because the getting bored or getting annoyed or sort of thinking, what am I doing here? Or forgetting what you're doing and thinking about something else, that all just happens. And being okay with that, being kind to ourselves when that happens, that bit is really just practice of kind of going, that's okay, that's normal, that's human, I'm doing okay, I'm not doing this wrong. There really is no way to do this wrong. We're just having a go at moving our eyes and moving our hands and kind of seeing what happens. So the next bit is pretty simple, and it really is just, we're just going to move the tip of the nose. We'll start with the nose. Imagine if you could draw a little line with the nose up and with a little line with the tip of the nose down. If you had like a bit of paint on the end of the nose and a piece of paper, you'd be drawing a little line. So we're just kind of, and you really don't, I just kind of noticed that I'm tipping my head quite far back, I guess, because I want you to see what I'm doing. But actually, this movement really can be pretty small. What you'll realise is that the eyes will just naturally follow. Up and down. And the eyes go a lot further than the nose. The nose is really painting quite a small line in the air. And the eyes are kind of almost following behind, and then they're sort of tipping down like a weight. And then they're travelling up. And they're going down. So they go slightly out further, the reach of the eyes up and down, than where the nose goes. One of the things that's interesting about eyes up and eyes down is that these are two very different states in the brain. So you could just paint up and hold that up there for a moment. So eyes up is a focused, alert brain. And if you paint down, and just gazing out a little bit ahead of you, eyes down is an unfocused, resting brain. And I think that's, we often hear in mindfulness classes, let your eyes rest out like a couple of feet ahead of your knees or your feet, depending if you're sitting on the floor or on a chair. And I think that part of that is because we know that there is this inward space, this sort of turning down and inward. But actually, research into what's happening in the brain when we move our eyes, that is absolutely correct. So if you kind of need to focus and be alert, it's great to kind of look up and let the brain have that sort of that different information. Sort of going upwards is a great way to bring ourselves into quite a lot of alertness, and that going down allows us to kind of drop that a little bit. So there's that sort of sense of energy and rest. Energy and rest. Energy and rest. So I'm going to stand again, and again, like the last movement, you can be seated. You can do what feels right or what's possible or comfortable for your body. I'm going to stand so that you can kind of see me doing things a little bit more easily. I like standing sometimes as well. Like I say, I kind of do that nice little bent knees, tucking the pelvis forward and just kind of letting my arms hang quite naturally down. That in and of itself kind of can bring me into a place of feeling a bit more comfortably present. So what we're going to do in this one is we're going to raise the hands up and down. Simple as that. I'm going to really encourage you to keep the elbows bent and not raise your arms too high. So we don't want to. We're not. I'm actually in a really low ceilinged room, but we don't want to. We're not stretching here. We're just kind of moving the hands up and down. And I think it's quite nice to kind of see if we can find something fluid. Kind of water reed-like, letting the fingers trace up and turning the palms down. And we're coming back, in a way, to that peripheral vision. So once you've got this and you've had a glance over at me, you're really just letting the eyes drift away from the screen, up, straight ahead of you, letting the eyelids come down just a few millimeters, and seeing how much of that hand movement you can keep your eyes on. Some people like to do sort of a breathing thing, breathing in as you raise your hands, breathing out as you lower them. And that's great. If that feels nice, do that. But we're really just seeing, what happens. I'm moving really slowly here. Can I go any more slowly? Hands can start to feel quite heavy doing this. And just keeping that peripheral vision, it will probably keep dancing in and out. And that's really okay. And that's the non-judgment, self-compassion part. It's really okay. It's really okay. And just kind of keep going like that for a moment or two. Seeing how much of your peripheral vision you can hold on to. Seeing what that feels like for you. And then coming back sadly to the screen. And the next thing is still, it's more with the eyes, and these are really all just ideas. They're just things that you could try out, even sort of next time you're going to do a mindfulness practice, or next time you're feeling a little bit stressed or distressed, and you think, oh, let me see if moving my eyes might be interesting or useful. Each one of these things is something that might be interesting, that might be useful. So the next, and might not be, and that's also absolutely okay. The next sort of thing that we're going to do is going to involve you moving around in the space that you're in. So hopefully you can still hear me. So just having your device wherever you need it to be so that you can still hear me. You don't have to walk far away, but just kind of standing up and starting to just kind of walk very slowly around your space. I'm going to ask you to find something to let your eyes land on. And that doesn't have to be anything of any interest. It might be a wire, or a crack in the wall, or a bit of light hitting the wall, or a bit of shadow somewhere, the corner of a book. But I'm going to ask you to find a point at which you can focus your eyes. So sometimes going in and out of two opposites is a really fantastic way for us to start to learn how to move in and out of something really easily. So you get that with posture. It's sort of like this is shoulders back, and this is hunched, and this is the middle. Shoulders back, hunched, this is the middle. But often it's that sort of the moving throughout the whole range that we have with our shoulders that lets us find what's the middle. Where's comfortable for my shoulders, and my head to sit on my shoulders, and my body to feel upright and comfortable and not in pain. You'll often need to sort of swing the pendulum to either way to kind of find those different places. You need to experience a full range. So finding an object, a point that's quite small, a couple of inches at most, and really looking at the detail on that point, that thing, that light switch, that little bit of peeled wallpaper, whatever it is, and really honing your eyes into that. So noticing the detail, the colours, the shapes, the light, the lack of light, just noticing the detail in sort of as much focus as you can. And then seeing if you can kind of pull the eyes back out into peripheral vision, and you can use your hands again if you want to. And then maybe kind of moving around the room, finding new object, find some new point, some new line in a piece of wood, anything, find some new place where you're going to focus right in. Notice the dark, the light, the shapes, the space around that little point, that object that you found. And then draw the eyes right out, using the fingers if you need to bring the eyes back into peripheral vision. And just kind of moving around really as slowly as you can. Slow is good. Slow is what allows noticing to happen. So whether you're walking out in nature or you're moving around in your home, when you go really slowly and you kind of do these things with your eyes, you start to be noticing the present moment. You're walking slowly, you're finding something, you're letting your eyes really focus in onto the object, see the detail, and then calm back out into peripheral vision. And then moving again, finding another object, letting the eyes really focus in, noticing the details, noticing the shapes, the colours, the textures, and then bringing the eyes back out again, using the fingers if you want or need to, letting the eyelids be that little bit kind of lower, blurry eyes. And just going maybe 2 or 3 more times, moving around your space. So, just the motion and the movement of the body, letting the eyes look for something and then let them rest. Find that spot, that point that they're going to look at, and really notice the details, the colours, the shapes, the textures. And in this, we can practice the non-judgment. This isn't about it being beautiful or the right object at the right height or the right place or that it's lovely. It's just a thing that our eyes can take detail in about. Colour, texture, light, and then come back out again into your peripheral vision. So there is nothing right or wrong about your environment or the things that you can see in it. We're just letting the eyes do their job, focusing in on an object, noticing the details, and then coming back out into peripheral vision again, letting the eyes rest in peripheral vision. So still moving around in your own space. I'm hoping that whatever room you're in, you have a window, no matter how small. And again, it really doesn't matter what the view is out of your window. It could be the back of another building or a scene across the city that you're in. Or it could be anywhere. I can see the roof of a farm across the path from where I'm living at the moment. So we're going to use kind of window as a place to go to look out. And then we're going to move into something that happens quite a bit in mindfulness, which is looking in, as in you personally. And the looking in and noticing what's going on inside of us is often something that's encouraged in mindfulness that some of us really struggle with. Maybe what's going on inside of us is bleak or frightening, or, you know, for those of us who experience chronic pain and chronic ill health, it can also just be like, oh, I don't really want to be going in there. I'm quite happy finding ways to distract myself, and that often involves going very fast, which is often then counterproductive to the stress and the health issues. So there's something about, again, sort of finding that sway. We're not going to stay anywhere very long. We're not going to sit for like 45 minutes noticing inside in the body and in the feelings. But just starting to, I think a word that I've often heard used is pendulate, so that we can even just spend a second or two inside and moving in and out really slowly, like the focused eyes and peripheral vision. So we're going to use the window, if you're going over to a window, to just look. And again, you can use your peripheral vision to take in as much of the view outside of your window as possible. No judgment. This is not about looking for beauty or an idea. It's just outside. So your eyes are just taking in outside. That's all they're doing. And then you're going to kind of draw your head down like we did before with the nose. The eyes are still open, but they're kind of going to lower about halfway, like half mast with the eyelids, and just going to check out. I find it, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but I often sort of put my hand on my chest and my belly. I like that. Not everybody does like that kind of sensation or that self-touch. If you like it, do it. If you don't like it, definitely don't do it. We're just going to look inside for a second or two. So just noticing, and it might just be your feet, your belly. And then coming back out to the window, outside, noticing the sky, the buildings, whatever it is you can see, the details, and also the big peripheral vision of the outside world. Looking up out of the window to the highest possible point and looking down and around. And then drawing the attention back in again. So just lowering the eyes about a foot ahead of the feet, really sort of letting the eyes go quite blurry, checking out the inside of you. Might be feelings, thoughts, physical sensations, and coming straight back out again. Out of the window, the sky, the visuals, the buildings, the sea, wherever you are, whatever you can see. Taking that in with the eyes, the colours, the details, the light, the shadow, the textures of that outside world. And we'll just go one more time, so sort of drawing the attention in again, letting the eyes really lower, half mast or even lower with the eyes, gazing blurry through the eyelashes, coming into you, your feelings, your body, your sensations. And then back out again, out of the window, the light, the shadow, the shapes, the straight lines, the natural lines, the details, the cracks in walls and bricks, maybe people passing by, cars, noticing all of these things, looking up to the highest point of the sky if you can see it, and down to the lowest point, and looking around. It's just taking in that outside world, the outside world is a place that we can always go to if looking in for a moment feels in any way kind of overwhelming. And also remembering, like at the beginning I said, you can step out of this altogether, you can have a little shake, you can bend your legs and get your thighs and your hips strong, kind of crouching, almost crouching position, kind of getting the legs strong can often kind of bring us out if we're starting to feel a bit uncomfortable or overwhelmed. So looking out or using sort of muscle movement to come out of things. So the next thing that we're going to do is a kind of funny one, because I'm really aware of how many people kind of go, ooh, memories, or ooh, imagination. So we're not going to do it for very long. It's going to be quite brief. Some people like it, some people don't. But it's about, it's a way of storing nice body states, nice states of mind. So when we blink really fast, we can store something in the brain, a sort of memory center wise. And all I'm going to ask you to do is either imagine, if that's available to you, or remember if it's not, or just kind of make up verbally, somewhere that you think is nice. So for me, somewhere that's nice, I like to be able to see quite far away into the distance. So I love being in like open countryside, like fields, and then in the distance I can see the forest and the mountains. But I love the sense of spaciousness. For me, that feels like a really lovely place. For some people, they like something more closed in. Sometimes I also like something closed in. I like a kind of sense of a cocoon and something soft, and a place that feels safe and small and squishing in. So just kind of thinking, what's a place that I would feel comfortable in right now, that I would like to be? And if you are a visual person in your mind, you can use your mind's eye to imagine that and give detail to it. If you're not a visual person, you can just kind of almost use the words inside your own mind to sort of describe it to yourself. It's a beach, there's the sea, it's blue, it's peaceful, there's no big waves. Or, like my image of the fields and the mountains in the distance. So just giving your brain something to kind of focus on, whether it be in language or in visuals, but just for a moment you could start to give a bit of detail to. Is it light? Is it dark? Are there things close to you or touching you? Is it scenery? Is it far away? Can you see a horizon line? Would there be smells there? And again, I can barely smell. My sense of smell is turned right down. But just imagining that maybe I'm surrounded by lovely smells might feel like a lovely thing to do, even though smell isn't really something that's available to me. So it's sort of just starting to bring into our present mind the idea of a place that feels lovely, that we would love to go to, or that we have been to. And as soon as you've kind of got that place, you've got, yes, I've got that place. I want you to blink really fast. So I'm talking about blinking like this. It's a bit of a funny thing to do, but just, so grab your place in your mind's eye, in the language that you have, or even jotting it down with a pen and paper if you have that. And just really holding in mind this place, this moment in time if it's real, or this place if you're just making something up, a place where no one can get to me, a place that's like a little velvet cocoon, whatever it is for you. And then blink really fast. So just blink, 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 blink. So we're kind of bringing ourselves into that lovely place and going, oh yeah, so nice, the sun on my skin, or the little velvet cocoon, wherever it is. And then blink, 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 blink. We're storing that. We're storing the loveliness. So the feeling is the thing that we're really looking for, the feeling of snuggly, safe, peaceful, whatever it is. And even if you can just grab it for almost a second, the minute you get even a little hint of that feeling, blink, 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 you're storing it really quite quickly and kind of holding on to it neurologically in the brain. It's a funny one, but it's interesting. So that's just something that I kind of wanted to share that I think is really interesting, and it may or may not be to you. That's also absolutely fine. So wanted to look at something else that I really like, that is also kind of imagination, but also not. So you can either use your imagination and for some of us that's easier than for others. Or you can just do the motions with me. Yeah, and there isn't really a kind of better for you or worse for you, because your brain works however it works. So whatever it is that you're doing that brings you into a state of like, oh yeah, I can feel just a little bit more at ease. I'm noticing where I am. I'm not judging where I am or what's happening for me right now. You're doing mindfulness. Even if you do it for 1 or 2 seconds, the brain likes it. It will be of benefit to you. Loads of research shows that, and I think that's why it doesn't matter if you practice seated, kind of doing whatever it is we imagine mindfulness and meditation looks like for an hour every day. It really is okay if you do 5 minutes of like, oh, I'm doing peripheral vision and I'm noticing and I'm not judging what I'm doing. This is mindfulness. This is okay. You're present, you're here, you're being compassionate and non-judgmental whilst being present here. That's it. You've done mindfulness. Any amount of time is of benefit to your nervous system, to your brain, to you. So I think for me that's always been a really important thing to have discovered, that the amount of time and how I do it doesn't matter. So I would like you to hold in your hands one of those giant bowls. I think they often have them like in the south of France or something, and they're for drinking. They're like cup bowls. And in your bowl is whatever hot drink you want: a hot chocolate, a lovely cafe au lait, a soya latte, a cup of tea, whatever it is that you would like. You have a hot drink in your cup, and you may imagine that, and you might just say to yourself, I have a hot drink in my cup. That's fun. So you're going to take your lovely hot drink that you have in your big cup, and you're going to bring it towards your face, and you're going to blow the surface as if you're going to sort of take a sip of something that's a little bit too hot, like we might. So we've got our big cup, and we're going to bring it into our face, and we're going to blow. We're not going to take a sip yet. We're going to move away. We're going to breathe in. We're going to bring it in. So this is a bit of a breathing one. We're going to bring it in, and we're going to blow. We're not going to do many, maybe 4 or 5 more. We're going to bring it out, and then we're going to draw it towards us, and we're going to blow as slowly as we can. And we're going to look down across the surface of our hot drink. Okay, so we're going to hold a hot drink, and when we draw it in, we're going to look down at it, and we're going to blow across it, because we're really trying to cool it down, and it's a big cup bowl of a hot drink. So we're going to draw it in. And really kind of, when you're taking your cup out, you're breathing in, there's an anticipation, I'm going to get my lovely drink. I'm going to get my lovely drink. We're going to draw it in, and we're going to blow the surface. So we're pulling it out, and we're drawing it in, and we're just going to blow one last time. Get all of the air out. You really want to cool your drink down. And one thing I would, it is great. Making your out breath is a really great way to think it. Sometimes you can feel a little bit lightheaded, but it's okay. It's just because you've got a bit more oxygen than usual. Next time you have a hot drink, I would really encourage you to do this. So next time you have a cup of tea or a hot chocolate, and you've got 1 or 2 minutes spare, which is most of us, we've got that at least once a day. You've got 1 or 2 minutes spare. Grab your cup, feel the heat. You might not be able to hold on to it for too long if it's too hot. You might hold the handle and just kind of touch it a little bit. But feel the heat. Notice the heat of your hot drink in your hands. Draw it in, smell it, blow it, and taste it. And just kind of allow yourself to experience your hot drink. Next time you have a hot drink, this is one of the most fantastic opportunities for mindfulness, because there's no judgment there. This is already an act of self-compassion, because you're letting yourself have a lovely hot drink, hopefully an unnecessary one, just something lovely. You've got water for thirst. Just have a lovely hot drink. The drawing it in, the smelling it, the blowing it, the sensation of the heat, really just noticing those things. Again, they're not good things or bad things, they're just things that your body can notice and experience, and that's kind of wonderful. Blowing it, tasting it, feeling the heat and the taste and the flavours roll back. And if you really notice, I often love that sensation of a hot drink kind of going in. Might be bits of it that you don't like, and that's fine, so just stick with the bits that you do like if it's just the holding and the blowing, not even the drinking, just the holding and the blowing and the smelling, that might be enough. That is your mindful moment. That is your mindfulness. It doesn't have to be sitting still, focusing in on the body and on your experience or on your breath. It doesn't matter where your focus sits, as long as it's in the here and now, and we're trying to let go for as long as possible of judgments and sort of meanness about what we're doing, about ourselves or other people. That's the kind of compassionate bit. But if you're in the moment with your hot drink, you are absolutely practicing mindfulness, and that's it's not just good enough. It is good. It is mindfulness, and it's kind of like not letting anybody tell you that it's not. But you have to sit still and focus on the breath. The focus on the breath is just it's just one way. It's just one way to bring us into presence. And I think that the difficulty with it is that for a lot of people that isn't available. It's uncomfortable. It's anxiety provoking. Or it's just really difficult for their brain to keep that focus on something that maybe they don't even notice that much. That isn't a sensation that they can kind of grab hold of as an anchor to the present. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for anchors into the present. So if you're stressed and distressed, you're going to want to bring that down a little bit. If you need an anchor to sort of hook you into the present moment, grab one that has some pertinence for you. If it's visuals or sound or a hot cup of tea, or walking and feeling the sensations of your feet, do that. Any act of presence without judgment and with kindness is an act of mindfulness, and it's a good thing. So just as a kind of final, and again, this is really really up to you. I quite like this, and just to kind of explore the idea of mindfulness in with you in your body, just for sort of a couple of minutes. There's a kind of movement through the body that I think can be quite useful. If you don't like doing things like that and you already know, please don't do this. Do your peripheral vision, go over to the window, look outside, peripheral vision. But just for a moment, kind of letting the eyes drop down to, as we would often say in meditation and mindfulness, maybe a couple of feet ahead of the knees if you're seated. Maybe do peripheral vision, maybe kind of getting the fingers going and the eyes hanging out there in that. I see the whole view ahead of me. There's no focused staring with the eyes. So that can be quite a nice place to go with the eyes. And then kind of just taking the attention to the hands, to the feet, to the eyes, to the ears inside and the surrounds of the ears, to the tongue inside your mouth, and to your belly. And just kind of dancing around any of those that feel okay for you to go to. So it might be that actually I'm only comfortable with my hands. I'm just going to notice my hands, especially if they're up and wriggling, And you could sort of press your feet, balls to heels, if you want to kind of notice the feet, if the feet are a safe place, a comfortable place to go to. Just noticing it's not, they're not good feet or bad feet. There might be no sensations, there might be lots. They're not good or bad sensations, just your feet. The eyes, the ears, the tongue, the belly. Kind of dancing around the hands, the feet, the eyes surrounds of the eyes. All those little muscles that work so hard. See if you can let them go. See if you can let the little muscles around your eyes just go for a moment. Peripheral vision is a great way to do that. For those of you who feel comfortable closing your eyes, you can go ahead. But there's also just remembering that there's no need. We don't have to do those traditional movements. But just noticing all those little muscles around the eyes. They work so hard. let them go.